Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the most unusual Ark creatures, so let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Astrocetus, and this is one of those creatures which on the surface may not seem that unusual, but I really can't think of any other game which has a creature like the Astrocetus. And also this was a very new thing to Ark as well. No space things had been done in Ark, and the fact that with Gen 1 we had a space biome and then we had this hunking beast of a creature, it is definitely an unusual Ark tame, as in it isn't like most of the other creatures in Ark. And there are only a couple of creatures which I can think of which are as unusual as this thing, and also at the same time follow the similar genre that this thing has of being a sea creature of sorts. The Astrodelphis obviously being a great example there, that meaning space dolphin instead of space whale, which is what Astrocetus means. Speaking of the Astrodelphis, next up is the Astrodelphis, and the only reason why I would say this is a little bit more unusual than the Astrocetus is its design is more unusual, and also its abilities are a lot more unusual than the Astrocetus. The Astrodelphis is essentially like a dart plane. This thing can just soar through the air and do so many acrobatics and shoot loads of lasers, and yes, it has technically been done before, but you wouldn't really expect it out of this creature, and its design and overall feel is very unusual, and I can't think of any Ark creature other than the Astrodelphis, of course, which controls like the Astrodelphis. And also, again, with the Astrocetus and Astrodelphis, it doesn't really make sense that they work outside of space, but they kind of have to. You know, it is the game of Ark, and there are many other maps, and there are many other biomes that aren't space biomes. So yeah, it just kind of breaks the immersion for me there, but you know, it's Ark, they're fantasy creatures, who knows, maybe they can just dart around in non-space as well, although they do make a lot more sense in space biomes. But obviously, for most of the time which you'll be using these things, you won't be using them in space biomes, you'll be using them to travel across the map, as both of them are great travelling mounts, the Astrodelphis being better for travelling, obviously, as it is a significantly faster creature, and also it's just a lot more fun to ride around on. Next up, we have the Bulldog, and this is strangely one of the cutest yet horrifying creatures that Ark has to offer, and obviously it debuted with Operation, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't appeared in any other map since, but be sure to correct me if I did get that wrong. And in terms of this thing's abilities, it is just a light pet like the Shinehorn and the Featherlight, which essentially will debuff things like Reapers and the Nameless. Not really useful on any other map, but they're definitely really cute, and the fact that there is a mask for the Bulldog, and you kind of put the Noglin in the same spot here as they are similar creatures, they definitely are respected, but very unusual tames. Now, I don't know what it is, but the Managama always seems really weird to me, and the Managama just seems like a creature which doesn't seem like any other Ark creature which I can think of in any way, shape or form. This is essentially like a Ferox type thing with ice fists that can jump into the air and has some sort of elemental power, and that also has ice breath and can freeze creatures. This is definitely an oddity and an unusual tame which hasn't been revisited since. There is no other Ark creature to this day which is like the Managama, and also the spelling for it is pretty unusual as well, but once you learn how to spell it once, you kind of don't forget it, as its name is that unusual. And it definitely is an extremely useful creature. Obviously, as you can see, it can travel across the map with insane speeds, and it deals a pretty reasonable amount of damage as well, which you can't get out of every great travelling mount. But the Managama definitely is great for that, and like I said as well, it is great at freezing creatures, and in a moment you will see what it is like when it does freeze creatures. The only thing you really have to watch out for though is this thing is extremely buggy and will get stuck on things, and it just did get stuck on something there. In terms of it freezing, it will freeze creatures for a very, very long amount of time, which is why it is heavily used by PvP griefers. I've heard not as much anymore since they got nerfed, but they still get used a little bit in terms of PvP griefing still to this day. Now, the Rock Drake is pretty similar to the Managama in a lot of things, but I think it is slightly more unusual, partly because it did come first. Obviously, Operation was the map that came up before Extinction, and also just the way that this creature is formed is a little bit more unusual. This is kind of like a somewhat T-Rexy chicken. I don't really know where those two creatures came from, but I would just call it kind of a T-Rexy chickeny turkey thing. again, I don't really know where I'm going with that. It is so unusual in the form that it is. You can't really relate it to other creatures, which is very, very weird, and definitely a sign which it is very unusual. But its taming method isn't particularly one of the most unusual, like you would expect from this creature. It is the exact same as the wyvern. You simply steal the egg from the rock drake nest, and then boom, once you've obviously incubated and raised up that creature, you have yourself a rock drake. And also they do come in a lot of colours as well, this pink being an example, which is actually quite weird for a lot of Ark creatures, as most creatures do follow a similar colour pattern, whereas the rock drake has a wealth of colours. And I actually kind of really like the tealy blue more than the colour which I've got here. I like a tealy blue, like a bluey green is what I kind of like on a wyvern. Not a wyvern, this is a rock drake. Why am I talking about wyverns? In terms of rock drake colour, that is my preference. What is your rock drake colour? Comment in the comments down below. Don't know why I said comment too many times in the sentence, but comment in the comments down below. What is your favourite rock drake colour? As I'd really like to know. Mine is definitely that kind of like bluey, greeny thing, but you know, some of you may be digging this pink and purple, which we got here. No, it's not pink and purple, pink and blue. I may be slightly colourblind. In at number 5 is the gas bags, and this is just a creature which is such an oddity. And also, I'm seriously questioning Wildcard here. How did they come up with the idea for this? Or did we come up with the idea for this? Honestly, I don't know, but somehow this thing was created, and it's been in the game since extinction, and I don't really get how it came around or how the idea came for it. It's literally a farting gas animal which flies on its own gas. It's a very, very weird premise, but actually a very cool creature which doesn't require a saddle. The saddle's only there if you have friends, unlike me, because I don't really have friends I play Ark with, or friends in general, you know, living that life. But that saddle is there if you do have friends, unlike any YouTuber which you can really think of. Us YouTubers, yeah, but we don't really get the friends. This is why we do YouTube, you know. But if you do have friends, then your friend can go on the saddle, and then you can travel together, which is nice, you know. The Diplodocus has a significantly higher passenger count, but that's not on the list because that isn't a very interesting or unusual creature. Anyway, I should stop talking about the Diplodocus. What's actually good about the gas bags? Well, on extinction, this is actually one of the best creatures out there for gathering metal. Obviously, you still have the RG, and the gas bags is significantly harder to control than the RG, but it is a lot cuter. And it's just, I like using the creatures which came on that map. And I'll always try to use the gas bags, as long as I can control it at the time, to do some metal runs. And once you learn it, it is a really, really great creature for doing those metal runs. If you don't just get stuck in a trench with loads of wyverns and get killed a couple of times. That happened because I forgot to enable creative mode, stupidly, for this B-roll. But, you know, editing, it looks like I did nothing wrong and I escaped perfectly. But there was multiple attempts in this, and then I flew too high and I got up caught into the world border. I am definitely not a great pilot of the gas bags. Also, if you find yourself like this, make sure to dismount just before you hit the ground. It'll save you. Now, the Rhinogonatha, I think, came from us. It was from some kind of creature voting thing anyway, and we did vote for this creature to be in the game, and it is one of the more unusual ones. There isn't any other Ark creature which is really like this thing. And also, I know loads of people are saying Rhinogonathas are rare, and I get that they're rare. On ASA at the moment, I've seen about 5 Rhinogonathas in the swamp biome. Is there an overspawn of Rhinogonathas on ASA? Wildcard, can you tell me please, if you're watching this video, because I've had way too many encounters with this thing. I've seen 1 Giga, and I've seen 5 Rhinogonathas, and these things are generally a lot rarer than a Giga, as they only spawn in one specific biome, whereas Gigas can spawn on several places around the map. In terms of the Rhinogonatha's uses though, this thing is essentially just an upgraded Quetz, which is a lot faster and deals more damage. As unlike a Quetz, it will deal more damage. It is significantly harder to tame and uses the taming method, which the Reaper has, which I'll talk about because the Reaper is ahead on this list. Oh my god, spoilers. But either way, the Reaper is ahead on this list, so I'll talk about his taming method similarly there. But you can always check out my Rhinogonatha taming guide if you want to know fully, in detail, how to tame this thing. And you'll see brief b-roll of me actually taming it, because this is from the guide video. I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I was just like, I'll take my guide video and then I'll just chuck that into b-roll, which is obviously why you're seeing me tame it here, and you're not seeing me tame every other Ark creature in all of the other b-rolls. But it is a very long and arduous taming process, which is extremely difficult and requires 2 Rhinogonathas, not 1. You're going to need 2 of those things, and you're going to need a pheromone, you're going to need to kill one, and then yeah, there's so much. Just check out the tutorial. I really shouldn't talk about it more. The Rhinognatha is just one of those creatures which is really unusual, and we voted for, and for some reason spawns way too much on ASA. Have no idea why, but it does. This is the Rhinognatha. It's one of Ark's most unusual tames. The spoiler is here, with the Reaper being in at number 3, and the Reaper is a even more unusual tame than the Rhinognatha, as obviously it came way before. The Rhinognatha is the most recent creature which has been added to Ark, apart from the Phasmatsuchus. Don't know if that is in ASA at the moment, but I'm going to count that as the most recent Ark creature. Is that thing coming to Scorched Earth or the island? Either way, it might not be here yet, so don't take my word on that one. Not quite sure. That may be a Scorched Earth creature. Actually, thinking about it, that is a Scorched Earth creature. The Rhinognatha was the one for the island. Yes, the Rhinognatha is the latest creature of Ark at the moment. And the Reaper has obviously been in Ark for ages. It came out in Operation. That was way back in 2017. And this thing was such an oddity at the time, but it really fits into that map, and its taming method is one of the most unusual in the game. Essentially what you do is you'll get a Reaper Queen to a really low amount of health. You can use a trap for this, it will make it so much easier, and you can use light pets as well. Not for the other bit of the taming method though, as that won't work with a light pet. You can't have a light pet when this thing impregnates you when you go up to it after you put its health down. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. Don't anyway, as it may somewhat fail, as the Reapers really do not like light pets. But after you have been impregnated by the Reaper, obviously after you damaged it and the impregnation has occurred, you just get a ton of XP, and then boom, you have yourself a Reaper. In at number 2 is the Bloodstalker, and this is just essentially a spider with, I don't think 8 eyes, but it may have 8 eyes, or it may have 12. Honestly, comment down below how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as right now, I don't know. I'm sure I could look up an image, but I know one of you out there knows the answer to this. But obviously, you can tell why the Bloodstalker is so unusual. No other Ark creature is really like this, and you could say the Aranio is another kind of spidery thing, but that is just kind of like a normal spider. The Bloodstalker is like a vampire, blood-sucking Spider-Man thing with an obscene amount of eyes. It may be 8, it may be 12, I'm not quite sure. Make sure to let me know. I want to know how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as I'm really not sure, as I have not seen one up close and personal for a while. But also, this thing's taming method is very much an oddity. Like no other Ark creature, apart from the Desmodus, obviously, off the top of my head, which I can think of, has the same taming method. You essentially get blood bags, which you'll need to syringe out of your body, or you can obviously use the Desmodus to harvest them now, but originally you just had to use the blood syringe to get those, and then it will just eat those, and then you'll tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and you can feed it some creatures before to get 100% effectiveness. But honestly, I've never bothered with that, as I'm not going to do like insane things with this creature. Like, I'm not going to fight bosses with the Bloodstalker. I just want a good one. And obviously for missions, you're not even going to need a Bloodstalker, but it is good to get one, obviously, so you can get to those missions, so you can get all of those hexagons. But before you get a Bloodstalker, you should definitely go to the Bogrish missions to practice. And finally, in at number 1 is the Velonosaur. And the reason why I have put this thing in at number 1 isn't because it has the weirdest taming method or anything along those lines. It is just, there has never been any kind of creature like the Velonosaur apart from the Velonosaur. I can think of no other Ark creature like this tame. And albeit, yes, it does have one of the simplest taming methods out of all of the creatures on the list. It is just a very simple knockout tame. No other Ark creature compares to this thing in terms of what it is. This thing, again, is just a moving turret, and there's no other creature which does this like the Velonosaur. And sadly, the damage of the turrets doesn't scale with melee, but obviously you can keep leveling up that stamina to shoot even more turrets out. And obviously I wouldn't recommend it in this close of a proximity, but it is definitely an extremely useful thing, which when you ride this thing you will use a lot. But it also just have your general just attack, hack and slash, and it also can shake spines off of it as well. And also, I think when you look at it head on when it's shooting turrets, it's a little bit creepy. That animation, just to me, is a little bit on the creepy side. Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most irritating Ark tames, so let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Carcharodontosaurus, and the only reason why this thing really is on the list isn't mainly because its taming method is difficult per se, but Ark is an extremely buggy game, and the Carcharodontosaurus taming method is very, very buggy, and I have had so many issues with this thing over the course of my time with this creature that sometimes I'll just go for a giga, as I know for sure that tame won't bug out, and there's loads of things like it won't go through or it won't process the right thing at the right time, and this tame can be really annoying when it's buggy, and it can be one of the most irritating things ever because it is so simple and you'll know you're doing it right and you know it's not in a blood rage, but still it is glitching out and you're not getting anywhere, and sometimes you just need to dino wipe or find a completely different one, even though you may have spent hours already trying to tame this one and you don't know why this thing isn't taming, or you think it will take a while. No, definitely you should find another one if you're having those issues, and those issues still exist quite a lot, and I've run into a few of those as well. But if you do want to know how to tame one, you can always check out my taming guides down below, and you should definitely work out how to tame one of these things, as these things are essentially just an upgraded Giga, and once tamed they're really powerful, really nice little neat carnivore. Well, not really little at all. In at number 9 is the Bloodstalker, and the Bloodstalker is obviously very well known for its new and intuitive taming method. This thing's taming method is pretty much like no other Ark tame, unless you count the Desmodus now, but this thing did come out significantly before the Desmodus. Gen 1 has been out for much longer than Fjorda, but I'm sure you all know that. And how do you tame this thing? Well, the way you tame it is by feeding this thing blood bags, and gathering those blood bags, especially when you don't have a Desmodus, and especially back in the day, was really annoying, as it took absolutely ages. And again, Ark is a buggy game, and sometimes the Bloodstalker tames would simply bug out, or they would say you've done 100% of the tame, but you hadn't, and then you'd just be stuck there for absolutely ages until they did tame, or you just run out of blood bags and simply die. And also, to get 100% effectiveness is even more annoying, as you have to feed it other creatures first, which can be an absolute pain, and this is definitely one of Ark's most irritating tames. But once tamed, you actually have yourself a really great creature, and it's no wonder, because people do actually tame these things, and if these were rubbish, then no one would really be taming them. And once tamed, they are great for gathering hexagons, as there are many racing missions on Gen 1 that use the Bloodstalker, and loads of things will be useful with the Bloodstalker on Gen 1, especially exploring the ocean biome, as it can float on top of water like you saw there earlier in the B-roll, and it is also a really great swimmer as well. It deals a good enough amount of damage, and it can travel across the map really fast with insane agility, and on Gen 1 this is really your only option. Next up, we have the Managama, and this thing mainly does come down to if your game is behaving, and thanks to the net gun now, these things aren't the most irritating tame, so they are a lot lower on the list than they would have been before the net gun came out, as when these things bug out, which is most of the time, still to this day, a normal trap will not work at all. These things will just completely glitch out of them, and there's nothing which you can do, and considering how fast they are, you're not going to be able to catch up to one and just continually shoot tranks into it, unless you've got literally hours and hours to tame a Managama, but that is so inefficient, and you should really try and get a net gun, as it is one of the most useful things as well, and probably surround it by a trap for good measure as well, as it gives you a long periods to build a trap around the Managama. And another reason why the net gun is so good for the Managama is you don't even have to really worry about putting this thing into a trap, as that is definitely not an easy task. But once tamed, you got yourself a great PvE and PvP creature, capable of a lot of things, but you should be careful so that it doesn't get stuck into things like it did there. But its main kind of fame is the fact that it can freeze creatures, and freeze creatures for so long, which makes it great for PvP, but it is actually pretty useful in PvE. If you're into freezing creatures and then killing them, it's a new kind of fun way to kill off some creatures. Next up, we have the Wyvern, and the reason why this is harder and more irritating to tame than the Manigama is because no net gun is going to save you here for this tame, as its tame method is completely different. And if you're wondering about the Crystal Wyvern, if you don't know how to tame that, that is one of Ark's easiest tames, and it definitely is not deserving of the list. But every other Wyvern, being the Ice Wyverns, the Fire Wyverns, etc., like Poison Wyverns, things like that, those Wyverns where it requires you to go into the Wyvern Trench and steal that egg from the Wyvern Trench, don't know what word trying to came out there, re-steal, you're not re-stealing anything, but either way, you're going to steal that egg from the Wyvern Trench, and that is actually one of the hardest Ark tasks which you can do. It sounds very simple on paper, but you need a creature which is fast enough to get in and get out. You need to be stealthy enough that the Wyverns don't catch you until obviously you steal the egg. Then there's nothing you can really do there. They're all just going to aggro onto you. And then also you're going to need to get out of there as well with the egg and not die. And also you're going to need all of the equipment to raise that egg as well. But it is all worth it after all, unless you're on Crystal Isles. Just get a Crystal Wyvern, there isn't really a point. Get a Blood Crystal Wyvern even. But once you do have a normal Wyvern, their C-flap ability on the ground is really good for harvesting wood, and they're great carnivores. They can pick up so many things, they do so much damage. They're really, really useful flyers, and actually one of the fastest in the game. You can't really go wrong with the Wyvern, just be careful when taming one. And now, this slightly does contradict my opinion when I was talking about the Carcharodontosaurus, but I will say the Giga is a much more irritating tame than the Carcharodontosaurus, as the prep is absolutely insane for this thing compared to the Carch, and this thing is just so much more irritating to prepare for, and also when taming, this thing can go really, really wrong, whereas the Carcharodontosaurus, you kind of have a little bit of like safe protection in a sense that you're going to have Gilly when taming one. And, you know, they can't go into Blood Rage really that easily once you start taming it. Whereas a Giga, they are just some of the most annoying creatures. They'll either really, really want to aggro onto you, or they'll just simply run away. And yes, you can get them into a trap, but sometimes trapping them can be an absolute pain, and especially on ASA with the new Dino AI. And the amount of tranks you need for this thing is absolutely insane, and it will take a huge amount of time to get all of those tranks, and especially on official. And breeding these things is even more irritating yet, as on official rates it takes up to 2 weeks to raise a baby Giga, and who has time for that? But on my rates, the Giga on my world on single player will raise in about, I think I've got it as about an hour and a half when I timed it last, which is still a really long amount of time, and the Giga is definitely an irritating tame. In at number 5 is the Golem. And why is the Golem so difficult of a tame? And it's mainly because Ark has something called cannons, if you didn't know, and they are some of the most annoying things to control in the Ark game. Their range of movement is so bad. If you could simply just press WASD for the cannon to move, this would be a significantly easier tame. But trying to aim a cannon, especially on a Paraceratherium, if you're using that on Scorched Earth, it can be an absolute pain to trap this thing in the first place and then actually aim in the right place every time, as these are a moving target. They move around, they can move everywhere. And also the taming resource is a bit of a weird one as well, being stones or metal, or I think it likes sulfur the best, but you know, you can correct me on that one if I'm wrong. I don't really do many rock golem tames, which can be a little bit irritating, but that isn't the most irritating thing you'll face. And once tamed, you'll definitely be glad that you tame one of these things, as they are some of the absolute biggest beasts on Scorched Earth, and are a must-have at some point, and really are a big Ark experience which you'll remember once tamed. Now, continuing the list, we have the Rhinognatha, and this is definitely one of Ark's most irritating tames, but why else would it be on this list? And this thing is such an irritating tame, and the lengthy process through this is, yes, albeit fun, but albeit very irritating at the same time. And there's no point me just saying this tame is irritating without actually telling you how to tame one. Firstly, I'm going to talk about actually finding a Rhinognatha, which is incredibly difficult as these things are really rare. If you're on normal Ark still, you can always use Creature Finder Deluxe, raise the dino weights, or do a dino wipe using the Destroy All Wild Dinos command, or the Destroy Wild Dinos command, not the Destroy All Wild Dinos command. Either way, that command command will be on screen right now. And also you can check out my Rhino Ganatha taming guide if you want a less brief summary and a full tutorial on how to tame one. In terms of the actual tame though, obviously apart from that initial prep of finding one, you'll need to find a male one, by the way. At least I think you need to find a male one. Either way, you need to kill that male Rhino Ganatha and then get the pheromone out of it. And then once you've got that pheromone, get yourself something like a Bronto. The Bronto is definitely the recommended creature here. And by the time you'll be taming a Rhino Ganatha, a Bronto will be very easy for you to tame. And also, if you want 100% effectiveness, those resources which were just on screen, you will need all of them. Yes, all of them. And then you'll net gun the Rhino Ganatha. Don't even bother trying to use anything else. Then take it down to the lowest amount of health you can without killing it. Obviously, you don't want to kill it. It's like the Reaper tame. You want to take its health down, and I think it will glow a different color. It'll glow like an orangey kind of glow. Or obviously you can use the magnifying glass on official, or if you have mods on normal Ark, not ASA. I don't know why I'm calling it normal Ark. They are both still Ark. Then you can obviously use the awesome spyglass. Really great mod. Then before it's kind of awoken out of the trap, which you obviously use the net gun for that, you fill the pheromone to your Bronto, and then after that, I don't know why my pronunciation's so bad at the moment, but after that you do feed it to the Bronto, and then when it comes out it will impregnate your dino, and that's where you're going to need all those resources which were previously on screen. Then your creature will just fall over, and then the Rhino Ganatha will come out of it, and then you have yourself a tamed baby Rhino Ganatha, and unlike Reaper babies, it won't kill you. Speaking of the Reaper, in at number 3 is the Reaper, and the Reaper really is one of those tames which you can't say is an easy one, unless you're on Gen 2, but I'm kind of going to discount that, and it is definitely an irritating one, and arguably a lot more irritating than the Rhino Ganatha, as you do not have access to flyers on Operation, so it is so much harder to start the tame as this thing spawns in a significantly more hostile biome. But in terms of the actual tame, there are actually less steps. You just take it down to that low amount of health, then it will impregnate you, and then you just go around killing things with yourself, as in your person character, as in if you were gathering XP to level up, it will just essentially level up the Reaper baby inside you. You also want some Reaper pheromone glands, and then once that Reaper baby is born, you will have yourself a little Reaper baby, which obviously is just going to instantly kill you, but you know, you've kind of just got to get used to that, and if you do use the Reaper pheromone glands, it's going to be a lot easier to you, as it will think it is your mother. And then obviously over time it will kind of look more like a Reaper and less like a kind of earworm, those things, whatever those bugs are called, like earworm, earwig. It's an earwig, isn't it? It will look less like that and more like a Reaper, and then you have yourself a successful Reaper tame. If you want to know how to tame one easy on Gen 2 though, just watch Razclark's tutorial and you have no fuss and no irritation. In at number 2 is the Basilisk, and this tame also does involve eggs, but not like something like the Wyvern, Magmasaur, or those kind of tames. The Rock Drake included in that as well. In terms of the Basilisk tame, you will need a Magmasaur, Wyvern, or Rock Drake egg, probably Rock Drake eggs, as you'll probably be taming this thing on Operation. Then you'll need it to not aggro onto you, and then just drop the eggs, and then it will eat them. Sounds really easy, but it can go wrong in so many ways, as you have to literally completely eradicate every creature in the area for it not to be aggroed, and you can't aggro it yourself, and obviously it's Operation, so no flyers can be used. There's just so much prep, and also getting all of those Rock Drake eggs is a feat in itself, and that is even if the game doesn't bug out and then this thing doesn't even eat the Rock Drake eggs. Definitely a very irritating tame, but once you get it right and it's started, it's not too bad from there, and you have yourself a really cool, neat Basilisk which has a wealth of abilities. And finally, in at number 1 is the Shadowmane. And yes, I'll agree, this isn't the hardest Ark tame, but in my opinion, it is the uttermost irritating. There is no other Ark creature out there which I kind of find as irritating to tame as the Shadowmane, in my opinion. Its tame method seems very simple, again like the Basilisk. You will just get baby fish in a fish trap, not baby fish, you'll get normal fish in a fish trap. Baby fish don't even exist. What am I talking about? You can tell it is very late on a Wednesday evening when I'm recording this thing. And yet, once you've got those fish, then you'll need to find one when it's sleeping, go up behind it, and then passive feed it those fish, and keep repeating that process. Obviously you want Gilly as well, so it doesn't wake up. But the thing is, these things come in packs, and they kind of do patrols, and sometimes some will be awake and some will be asleep, and also they're really easy to wake up. And yes, with a trap, they're not the most irritating thing out there, but still, to me, they are the most irritating. I don't care what any of you say in the comments, this is the most irritating Ark tame in my opinion. opinion, and no creature can top it. But oh wait, I forgot one more. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Macy-Juski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.